تبسم وخل الهموم وخل الغموم وخل الضجر.
أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال الله تعالى في شان حبيبه إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما تحب وترضى بأن تصلي عليه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واصبر على ما يقولون واهجرهم هجرا جميلا. وقال تعالى يريدون ليطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره الكافرون. صدق الله العظيم وبلغنا رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Most respected ulama, my respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. My discourse for this afternoon is on media wars. Are we engaging in battle? Are we winning the battle? Or are we, even for that matter, on the battlefield itself? This is my discourse for this afternoon, and I would like to touch on some pertinent issues which cropped up during the course of this week. One was the Supreme Court ruling in Malaysia regarding the usage of the word Allah by a Roman Catholic newspaper. And the second one was a local one by a local organization which had requested, which had demanded actually, that militant Muslims should be taken out of mainstream media, which was a case which they lost. And in view of this, I thought I'd discuss some of these issues regarding media and media wars in particular. Let me read something out to you, and you figure out where this is from. In any war between civilized man and the savage, in any war between civilized man and the savage, always support the civilized man. Support Israel. Defeat jihad. Where do you think this would have appeared? On one of those Jewish settlements, you know, the walls of the Jewish settlements, or written by some right-winger guy, or some extremist Jewish fundamentalist, or whatever it is? Well, who published it is another issue. But where it's to be found is what is important. If you live anywhere in New York, if you travel the subways of New York, if you come to see some of the billboards of New York, this was presented in billboards on the subways of New York and various other strategic points in New York, and was an initiative of the American Freedom Defense Initiative. In spite of 2 court cases to have these billboards removed, the cases were lost. Imagine the statement. Imagine the impact that it has on people who are walking daily to the subway, who are walking to those strategic points in New York City, and they are reading this message all the time. What is it portraying about Muslims? That we are savages. That the Arab Muslims, the Palestinians are savages. And in the war between civilized man and the savage, always support the civilized man. And who are the civilized people? The Israelites. And what must you do? You must support the state of Israel, as it is called, and defeat jihad. That's on billboards. What was the Muslim response to this? As far as I know, zero. Why? Do we lack funding? Do we lack resources? Do we lack that type of advertising capacity? No, I don't know. But this is the issue that we have with the media war. When we talk about jihad, and today words that are essentially Islamic have been literally hijacked by the media, particularly the secular media, and has been utilized as weapons of mass destruction for the image of Muslims. One of them is jihad. One of them is fatwa. Right? And one of them is militant or fundamentalist. These are some of the 4 or 5 favorite words in the Western media today. You'll only hear jihad, you'll only hear fatwa. When it comes to various ideological groups, you'll hear Sunni, Shia, Salafi, Wahhabi. All these are now, key words and flashpoints for people. The moment they hear that, their attention is piqued, the curiosity is piqued. How do Muslims respond? What has been the response of Muslims? Well, the only known response of Muslims and the most apparent response of Muslims is what they call in the media world flak. Flak is a term used in the media world when the public responds negatively or sometimes with outright hostility to certain types of media coverage. And with that flak, you have something else which many concerned Muslim organizations engage in, which is known as flak attack, wherein interest groups attack some of the media coverage which they may regard as biased. And this impact of this flak attack is felt in the newsrooms throughout the world. Right? Throughout the world, Muslim communities have one type of knee-jerk reaction to any type of negative, biased media coverage which Muslim may regard as biased, and this is what they call flak attack. So you'll get, like in South Africa, you'll get groups like the Media Review Network, or you'll get RAIN, or you'll get other interested groups, or you'll get people who write in letters to the editor under nom de plumes, protesting regarding certain matters, certain biased media coverage or whatever it is there. And this is generally and most often the most common response to anti-Islamic articles or biased media coverage of Muslims. These are the ways that we go. But obviously, this type of flak attack is not enough. And this is something that was realized and recognized almost 30 years ago. And the leaders of the Muslim world realized that addressing the issues of media and biasness in media could not be restricted primarily to flak attacks. How did the Muslim world respond? Now you're talking from 1972. In 1972, the Organization of Islamic Conference, which is an international Islamic group comprising various Muslim countries that support it and fund it, established what was known as the International Islamic News Association, if I'm not mistaken, INA. Okay? Established by the OIC. But realistically speaking, in the past 30 years, plus minus, so in fact more than 30 years there, the impact of this International Islamic News Agency has been minimal, if I'm being very, very optimistic about it. In the sense that it can't compare with Reuters, it can't compare with Associated Press, it can't compare with United Press International. Right? Most of the news coverage, the raw information that most news organizations receive throughout the world are filtered through these media networks, media associations, particularly Reuters. You must have heard it. Associated Press. Reuters is in London, based in London. Associated Press is based in America. You have the AFP, Associated French Press, right, which is based in France. You have United Press International. These are the big players with regards to information. And how big is Reuters? Reuters has plus minus 16,900 members of staff. Right? They operate in 131 countries. Right? Similarly, the Associated French Press and so on, they got a fancy French name, okay? They also have thousands of staff members, right? And they publish their news in Arabic, French, Portuguese, and so on, and English, obviously. 90% of media coverage in Muslim countries, which is then filtered down to the various media networks throughout the world, come from Associated Press, AP, Reuters, AFP, United Press International, and so on there. And when it comes to INA, the International Islamic News Agency, which, by the way, refers to itself as being something that is, its mission statement is to consolidate and safeguard the rich cultural heritage of Islam. That's the mission statement of INA, International Islamic News Agency. Interestingly enough, most of the news content that comes out from the International Islamic News Agency has very little to do with Islam. Okay? So in the past 30 years, we Muslims haven't been able to do and engage in any type of jihad, active struggle with regards to the media wars. And remember one thing, when it comes to jihad and when it comes to active struggle, a word which has been hijacked by the Western media to purely to be restricted to a militant or some type of military incursion, Right? We've lost the plot as Muslims, wherein the Holy Prophet ﷺ clearly said, أَفْضَلُ جِهَادٍ مَنْ قَالَ كَلِمَةَ الْحَقِّ عِنْدَ سُلْطَانٍ جَائِرٍ أو كما قال. The Holy Prophet ﷺ said that the best form and the most favored form of actively struggling in the cause of Islam is to speak the words of truth before an oppressive tyrant and oppressive ruler. That's the greatest form of jihad. Meaning, the greatest form of jihad in Islam is not militant. The greatest form of jihad in Islam is to be eloquent. We need to be able to articulate and communicate our perspective. We need to use the mass forms of media out there to articulate Islam's perspective on any matter. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to, in the past 30 odd years, create a good enough platform to be able to do so. Again, I ask the question, is it an issue of resources or financial issues? Yes, to a certain degree, it's about financial resources as well. Just to give you an idea, do you know there are plus minus 500 Arab TV and radio stations throughout the world? 500. From Morocco all the way to the UAE. Private Arab satellite channels and whatever it is. But the problem is not only external, but internal. We are very quick at times to always say media bias, media bias, media bias. But before we carry on discussing the issue of media bias, we've got to understand that media itself is also constrained by certain, what Noam Chomsky and so on there had mentioned as being media filters. All right? Everything that comes through, journalists at times also find their hands tied, because they have to work within certain restraints and certain filters that dictate as to what content will be presented on news. To give you an example, right? Sometimes it's not all about the newsroom itself or the network itself per se being biased. It is about the flow of information. It's about who owns the company. It's about a whole lot of things. And I'm just giving an idea as to what Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman in their book called Manufacturing Consent. They wrote this in 1988. They spoke about media filters and those things there which influence what is presented finally to the consumer who is going to be reading that type of information. They said there are 5 media filters. One is size and ownership. The bigger you are, the more power you wield. And we're talking about the Rupert Murdochs of the world and so on. Okay? And remember, these media companies are profit-oriented. Right? So, news sells. And bad news sells even better. And if you can milk a story for all that it is worth, as long as it is selling newspapers or magazines or bringing in advertising there, they will utilize it there for their benefit, because they are not interested necessarily in truth and finding out the truth and engaging in balanced media coverage. They are biased towards that which will give them greater profit. That's one media filter. The second media filter is advertising. Obviously, when it comes to media, there won't necessarily be some moral, legal and ethical restraints, right? As long as it is news which is printable and there are enough people supporting the type of media coverage in the form of advertising there, they're going to punt it. Right? Most of your news items today, most of your programs that you have today, most of the media that is presented to you, whether it's on the internet, whether it's on YouTube, whether it is any type of media, is driven by advertising. So if the advertiser is a major supporter and they get most of their revenue from the advertising, and he's a major supporter of a certain school of thought or a certain ideology or a certain political stance or whatever it is there, they will punt with their money. They'll put their money where their mouth is. And accordingly, you will be in one form or the other, you'll have your hands tied or your hands twisted to be able to utilize your media coverage in accordance with your profit orientation and the type of advertising that are coming in. So that's the second media filter. The third one is sources, the flow of raw data. Sometimes Muslims speak about, there's no adequate coverage of the Palestinian issue or the Egyptian issue. Right now, you may notice there's no story about Egypt anymore. The story went dead, as they call it. The story is dead. Similarly in Syria, the story is basically dead. Why? It's so last month. It's so like 2 months ago. Right? They need something new. We, the consumers of all this type of information, want something new. We get bored after a while. Ah, Syria again. Oh, Egypt again. No one wants to hear that. And it doesn't work for the advertiser. It doesn't work for the newspaper. So if it's a dead story, in spite of its relevance, politically or morally, it's just going to go back, and they'll just bring it to print. They won't even give it a picture. Sometimes it's because of a lack of sources. If a news agency does not have its sources in that area to verify a story, no matter how important the story may be, because of lack of satellite imaging, because of lack of photography, because of lack of information regarding a very important matter, it may not become mainstream news simply because there's not enough information regarding the matter. Okay? Then the fifth thing that Noam Chomsky had spoken about with Ed Herman in Manufacturing Consent, he said the fifth media filter is anti-communism. Remember in 88, anti-communism was still vogue. Right? It would be very easy to turn anti-communism to anti-Islam. Right? In this day and age, anti-Islamic sentiment, anti-Muslim bias and so on there sells papers. People are reading it. Right? And these are some of the media filters that newsrooms and news institutions utilize in order to make their job and make their newspapers and various types of media and so on there more effective and more palatable to the greater community out there. We've got to keep this in mind as well, because there are certain constraints. Okay? Then comes the issue with itself, with the Muslim community. Al-Arabiya and Al Jazeera are the two most well-known mainstream media outlets coming out from the Middle East. Al Jazeera itself was started off by the Amir of Qatar, right? And up until 2006, he was still bankrolling it. Okay? Al Arabiya is its counterpart in the MBC, Middle East Broadcasting Corporation. Together, they reach 60 million Arabs. They reach 60 million Arabs. But in spite of these two Arab media giants, they haven't even made a dent, or they haven't even, really caused an accident on the media highway at all. To say, look here, we can bulldoze some story or the other and come out in the forefront regarding matters of the Middle East as well. Again, I'm going to ask the question, does it come down to money only? No, it's not. Does it come down to expertise only? No, it's not. Right? This is a reality that we've got to be aware of. I did a little bit of research and I had a reference from quite a few other magazines written about media bias and so on. Right? And some of those articles mentioned that there were so many Muslims magazines that were established which were very relevant, which were very topical, which were very political, right? And had a lot of interesting information in it. Not like our lifestyle magazines that we get here in South Africa, unfortunately, right? But most of them, have become defunct. Most of them. You may remember some of those international magazines. You may remember some of those international magazines that used to be printed in the 80s, right? And in the 90s and the early 2000s. Most of them went defunct. You had Q News. You had ML is still going, right? You had Ilum. You had Al Talib. You had Crescent International still runs. You had most of these magazines, but out of most of the magazines that had an international following, almost 80% of them are defunct. Right? There used to be Islamica up until recently, and now it's been transformed and it's come into a new name. It's known as Islamic Monthly. Right? Excellent. It won the media award, but it is struggling because of lack of advertising and lack of sponsors. That's one. The second thing is that we can't say that there is a paucity of journalists or whatever it is there. We have plenty of journalists out there. But the only companies that are employing them are the companies that are going to give you a whole set of restrictions as to what you can report and what you can't report. The independent journalists that we rely on to present our perspective, right, from what you would call a positive perspective, to a certain degree, are people like Robert Fisk, John Pilger. I can't name you many Muslim journalists who do the type of work that Robert Fisk or John Pilger would do, coming down to the truth. And in order for them to be able to do that, they make enormous sacrifices. But to their credit, they try to present a very balanced perspective. Now again, an issue of media bias I want to present to you to show you how we need to become active, because I want to come to this point. In 2010, on New Year's Eve, a Coptic Christian church was attacked in Alexandria. You may have heard of it. It was a big story. Right? One suicide bomber went inside there, he killed 23 people and injured 100 people, white people who were engaged in mass on New Year's Eve. All the world's media covered it. And the coverage was presented in such a manner that people saw all the dead bodies, on news coverage. They saw the news coverage of people, people being thrown out, coming out on stretchers and whatever it is there. And there was also a scene of Muslims cheering. Okay? What the media, the mainstream media didn't show you was the fact that when the Muslims of Alexandria heard about this suicide bomber who had engaged in this heinous act, thousands, not 10, 20, 30, but thousands of Muslims went to the church, that very same church, and created a human chain around the church. A few, during that period of time and even after that, right, the next Christmas, around the church to ensure that the Coptic Christians would be able to hold their mass in peace. Thousands of Muslims. On the day, Muslims from Egypt changed their Facebook profile from maybe crescent or thing there to a crescent and a cross, to show solidarity and to show support of the Coptic Christians whom the Holy Prophet ﷺ has a family link with as well, because Maria Qibtiyya was a Coptic. Okay? But if you look in the mainstream media and Google it as well, you won't find that story portraying Muslims, of thousands of them, in a positive light about the way we reacted to it. What you will see is a handful of people who possibly may have been cheering. These are the things that we need to bring out to the fore. But how do we do it? Well, when people complain to me about resources, I take them back to the Holy Quran and the teachings of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Muslims had very scarce resources during the era of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Financial resources, manpower, intellectual, whatever it was, right? It was at the very bare minimum. But with that bare amount of resources available to them, the Muslims in the era of the Holy Prophet ﷺ performed miracles. They performed miracles. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the finance. It wasn't about the power. It wasn't about the political clout. It was about the degree of commitment and steadfastness, istiqamah. That we Muslims, we get josh all the time. We got no hosh. If an issue takes place now, we'll fall there for 2 weeks. Nara Takbir, we'll make a big noise there. But after that day, we all fizzle out. How much do we need to start off an international news station, international news agency? Money. We got plenty of the Arabs. They're not going to give it to you. They themselves, and I'll come back to that just now. We don't require too much of money. You've heard of Wikipedia. Who hasn't heard of Wikipedia today? Right? If you want information, you're either going to Google or you're going to Wikipedia. That's the one that you refer to all the time. It has plus minus 4.3 million articles in English and 30 million articles minimum in various other languages. Various other languages. Who is it run by? A multi-million corporation? No. It's a non-profit organization run by a handful of volunteers. Handful of volunteers. Yesterday I went on to Wikipedia, I was looking for something. The local one said, if everyone who reads Wikipedia donated 50 Rand only, right, in one day, it would be enough to keep Wikipedia running for a year. The whole world refers to Wikipedia, but it's run by a handful of volunteers who survive on charitable donations. Why? We don't have that degree of capability and capacity within us. Don't we have that? And today, with the modern jihad, we're talking about modern jihad. The modern jihad is not on the battlefield. It's not about militancy. It's all about communication. That's where battles are won and lost. Right? We have those tools in our hand. All those twits who are on Twitter can utilize it for some benefit to the Muslim community. And these things go viral. These things can go viral. I mean, the people who were mobilized during the Arab Spring, using what? Using Twitter, using BBM, using all these social media, right? networks and so on there, to be able to present the message. No, this is where we're having a protest march. This is where this is taking place. This is where that is taking place. They managed to mobilize people. They managed to bring people in and tell them, look here, this is what we need to focus on. What costs us? And what is it going to cost us? We're spending the time on our social media networks, on our Facebooks and whatever it is there. What is it going to cost us to create an international community, right, that will be able to present a perspective on any political matter anywhere in the world? So if you're getting a so-called bias report about an issue in Bahrain, right, using social media like Twitter, Facebook, and various other social media there, find out the real news. If you use Vine, I'm sure all the internet savvy people are there. Vine is a 6-second, I think. It's about a 6-second video. You can present a message in 6 seconds and carry on. If the guy is interested in your message, he's going to carry on clicking onto it. Instagram, all of these things are there to... Huffington Post, how did it come into being? It's one of the most powerful internet digital newspapers in the world today. She was down about 2 weeks ago, I think she was down. A young lady established Huffington Post. We don't need it. All it requires is a little bit of effort on our part, a little bit of commitment on our part. Instead of us sitting there and crying, boo-hoo, we are presented in a negative way, this one here, that one there. Become active about it there. Even our local radio stations, even our local news satellite TVs and whatever it is there. If you look at the type of information, right, that is being delivered and transmitted through these media, although we applaud the effort that is being made, but it needs to become a little bit more professional. Right? It requires them to extend their net a little bit and just not rely on the normal news sources. Go out there and create that thing. We need to create what is known as Institution for Public Accuracy, IPA. We need a Muslim Institution for Public Accuracy. It's an American-based organization. It started off with $100,000 US. They established themselves in Washington, right? And it's just a lobby group which lobbies the media to push stories about economics, about the environment, about healthcare, about issues affecting the people of America, human rights policies and so on there. All we need is one like that there, which will be able to push news. You know, they say push. You know, you get it in for your RSS feeds. You know, push the news through. Just send the news through all these media outlets there to say, look, this is an important issue that needs to be discussed. Eventually, you are going to create an impact. Wikipedia does it with a handful of volunteers, with a small amount, with a small budget, but they render a service for billions of people throughout the world. Don't tell me the Muslim community can't do it. And wallah, all of these things here, no, you can't use modern technology. Come on, get over it. Get over it. All these, archaic fatwa and archaic views about media and mass media needs to be put to rest, because eventually, if you look at the era of the Holy Prophet Ali, they all existed. We talk about a Facebook wall. How can you be on Facebook? No, fine. Create your own no Facebook then. Create your own no Facebook. But we're talking about, the wall on, you put something onto your wall on Facebook, right? What used to happen in Makkah al-Mukarramah? They used to use the wall of the Kaaba to pin their poetry onto it in order to compete with each other regarding who was the best poet, because these people were linguistic people, these people were people of literature. They used to use the Kaaba wall for that, to present their information and so on. Right? It may have been the ancient form of what we know today as a Facebook wall. But the walls of the Kaaba were utilized to transmit and propagate information. And Umar ibn Khattab one day went there and he took the verse of the Holy Quran, Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna sha'nika wal-abtar. And when people read that, they say, nothing compares to that, when they pulled off all of their poetry. The Holy Prophet ﷺ had Hazrat Hassan bin Thabit radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who used to respond to all the negative propaganda about Islam and about the Holy Prophet ﷺ in the form of poetry. He would have his man there. So if anyone on the jihad field as well would say any words of deriding or diminishing the status of the Muslims or trying to put them down there, Hassan bin Thabit would go forward there and he would respond to them. This is all in Sunnah. These were the very systems that the Holy Prophet ﷺ established. That's it. I can go on, but we don't have the time to do so. But this is the way forward. Our youth need to be mobilized. They've got it in their hands. We just need to know how to use it effectively. And you know what? We need to learn how to effectively communicate and articulate. We can't present our perspectives. Right? We've got to stop being so, we just have emotional knee-jerk reactions. We need to go beyond these things. Allah grant us the tawfiq and hidayah, inshallah ta'ala. Wa ma alayna illa al-balagh.
تبسم تبسم وخل الهموم وخل الغموم وخل الضجر.